Do you ever look at the world and just wonder why? Why is everything so crazy? Why has everyone lost their minds? Why is everything getting weirder and weirder and weirder? To quote Terrence McKenna,
it's only going to get weirder. The level of contradiction is going to rise excruciatingly, even beyond the excruciating present levels of contradiction. I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
And today we are going to talk about why things are so weird. By looking at the movie Brazil and the term hypernormalization. And hypernormalization is a tricky concept, first introduced by Russian author Alexei Yurchak. I hope I pronounced his name right. But he introduced the concept of hypernormalization in his book, Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More, The Last Soviet Generation. The term described a socio-political phenomenon that occurred in the final years of Soviet Russia. During this period, the Soviet society was experiencing significant decay and dysfunction. The state was failing, and the official ideology was losing any credibility. However, the people were unable to envision an alternative reality, so they continued to act as if everything was normal and treated the absurdity of the world they lived in with indifference. This collective indifference created a paradoxical state where everyone knew the system was broken, yet they all behaved as if it was stable and unchangeable. This led to a surreal coexistence of the absurd dysfunctional reality and the maintained illusion of normalcy, encapsulating the essence of hypernormalization. So, in short, hypernormalization is a term that is used to describe systems where the sheer absurdity and dysfunction are ever present, but the people are unable to envision an alternative reality because the absurdity has become so normalized, so they continue to act as if everything was okay and normal. And a lot of media has tackled this concept, especially regarding Soviet Russia. Chernobyl deals with this in its famous scenes where the scientists refuse to admit anything has gone wrong despite sky-high radiation levels. The Death of Stalin handles this in a hilariously absurd fashion, and it's why it's one of my favorite movies. But the movie I think that handles the concept of hypernormalization the best is Brazil. And the reason why I think Brazil is the best movie to look at this concept through is that it revels in the weirdness of the world Terry Gilliam created. It takes everything crazy about our world now and Soviet Russia then and cranks it up to 11. And we see this world through the eyes of Sam Lowry, the main character, who seems to be one of the only people in this world who realizes how deeply absurd and dysfunctional it is. But before we get into hypernormalization and how it relates to Brazil and how it relates to our society today, let's briefly go over the plot. The film opens up on a small, cluttered apartment. Mr. Buttle, an ordinary man, is spending a quiet evening with his family. Suddenly, heavily armed, black-clad police officers burst through the ceiling, descending on ropes and creating a scene of utter chaos. And they promptly arrest the poor Mr. Buttle for reasons and ransack his apartment for also reasons. This impersonal brutality emphasizes the cold, mechanical nature of the world that Terry Gilliam has created. As Buttle is taken away from his family and left in shock and unable to comprehend why this is happening. The story arc of Mr. Buttle serves as the most obvious example of hypernormalization in Brazil. It begins with a simple clerical error. A fly lands in a typewriter, causing the name Tuttle to be misspelt as Buttle. This fly in the ointment, so to speak, sets off a chain of events that leads to Mr. Buttle's wrongful arrest and eventual death. The absurdity of this situation is amplified by the complete lack of accountability or remorse from the powers that be when Sam Lowry, our protagonist and hero of this story, tries to rectify the mistake. The bureaucracy See, folks, the thing about making these videos is that you talk and talk and talk, and you forget how to say words. So, bureaucracy. I think that's it. The bureaucracy is so deeply entrenched in its procedure that it becomes impossible to correct the most obvious errors. This highlights the very specific dehumanizing effects of a hypernormalized society, where individuals are powerless against the machinery of the powers that be. And the powers that be do not care if they make mistakes. They do not care if they wrongfully arrest somebody. They just exist in their absurdly clownish fashion for all of us to be victims of. Mr. Buttle's arc reminds us again and again throughout the movie that life in a society where the absurd has become so normalized, it is the average person who pays for it in the end. Such is where Mr. Buttle's family receives a meaningless apology and measly refund for his wrongful death and arrest, illustrating the impersonal cruelty of indifference people in hypernormalized societies operate in, where human lives are reduced to mere transactions and half-hearted apologies. If this is starting to remind you of our world, you're not crazy. I'm just gonna say that. You were not crazy. That's the point of this video. And the crux of Brazil lies in its portrayal of a society where irrational dysfunction and absurd systems are so deeply entrenched they are seen as unchangeable realities. This is hypernormalization in action, where people accept the absurd and dysfunctional because it becomes their norm. And we see this throughout the film as we follow Sam as he navigates this surreal, absurd world, trying to correct this wrongful arrest caused by a humble little fly in a typewriter. His journey is filled with bizarre and often nightmarish encounters that illustrate the sheer madness of the world Terry Gilliam created. Which brings us to Robert De Niro's best role in his entire filmography, Mr. Tuttle, the vigilante heating engineer. The reason Mr. Tuttle was confused with Mr. Buttle and why this whole chain of events unfolds is because Mr. Tuttle has broken free from the shackles of bureaucratic inefficiencies and runs about town as the Batman of air conditioner repairman in this dystopian reality. And Sam encounters Mr. Tuttle when his air conditioner breaks, or heater. I think it's heater. His heater breaks, and I think it's overheating his apartment, which makes more sense in this dystopian reality where something wouldn't break and stop working, it would malfunction and just make your life worse, which I think fits pretty in the milieu of Brazil. Tuttle arrives and begins fixing the problem without, notably, the necessary forms or paperwork or bureaucratic oversight. And just as Tuttle is finishing up, the Central Services repairmen show up. And Sam, trying to hide the fact that a rogue repairman is fixing his heater without the required forms, he asks the Central Services repairman if they have the ever-elusive...
Have you got a 27B stroke 6? 27B stroke 6. Now look what you done to it.
Flustering the repairman, who leave in anger, only to return later in the movie to tear Sam's apartment apart in a fit of bureaucratic rage. This encounter highlights the absurdity of the bureaucratic system in this world, and the surreal world Sam is trapped in, where practical solutions are criminalized and rigid procedures are violently enforced. This all happens in front of the backdrop of Sam trying to be his own kind of vigilante by rectifying a clerical error caused by our friendly fly that led to the ultimate demise of Mr. Buttle, not to be confused with Mr. Tuttle, who is played by Robert De Niro, and this is his best role, and I will die on that hill. But Sam's attempts to correct this error and trying in vain to find personal happiness throughout the movie.
You probably think I'm bonkers, right?
No, I think you're very attractive.
What?
Yeah, sit back. Let me have a look at you. Oh, yeah. Good looking, sexy. Just my type.
In this crazy, wacky world that Terry Gilliam has created, shows how much these dysfunctional systems are normalized. And to deal with the absurdity of his world, Sam often retreats off into daydreams. And in his daydreams, he imagines himself as a heroic figure soaring through the sky and rescuing a damsel in distress. These dreams are in stark contrast to the mundane, hyper-controlled reality that he exists in. They symbolize his yearning for freedom and to escape the absurdities of his world. However, even in his fantasies, elements of this dystopian, absurd reality intrude, showing how deeply ingrained these systems are in his psyche. These dreams represent his internal struggle against the controlling, absurd, ridiculous, crazy forces in his world. And in one of his dreams, the samurai, faceless and imposing, symbolizes the bureaucratic machinery that crushes Sam and everyone else's individuality in this world. And Sam's victory in these dreams is fleeting, reflecting his inability to change much of anything about the world he really exists in. And these dream sequences are crucial to understanding not only Sam, but the world he operates in, where it is only in our imaginations that we are able to change much of anything, and that we will always be up against the entrenched absurdity of the systems we operate in. And we are often the bystanders of the brutal reality they create. Or we are willing participants in this brutal reality. And one of my favorite scenes that illustrates this and illustrates how hyper-normalized this society is, that directly relates to our world and not a Soviet one, is when Sam visits his mother. Her obsession with cosmetic surgery and her social circle's acceptance of increasingly grotesque procedures highlights the absurd lengths to which people go to conform to social norms. It's a disturbing reflection of how people normalize even the most irrational and harmful practices in their pursuit of acceptance and status. However, the scene that perfectly encapsulates the absurdity of hypernormalization, where the bizarre and irrational become mundane and unremarkable, is when a singing telegram messenger arrives at Sam's ransacked, torn up, destroyed apartment to deliver a message from his mother. And despite the chaos and destruction around them, the messenger cheerfully sings a message without acknowledging the mess or destruction or insanity of the situation that she's just walked into. The insane mess is just reality, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we just sing songs and pretend everything's all right. And to summarize all of this, Brazil serves as a powerful commentary on hypernormalization, showing how authoritarian regimes maintain control by embedding irrational and domineering practices into the fabric of society. These practices become so deeply entrenched they are perceived as unchangeable and unquestioned. The film underscores such dehumanizing effects of such regimes and the difficulty of achieving genuine resistance and transformation in a hypernormalized world. Now let's talk about how we can relate all of this to our modern world. The specific form of hypernormalization we see in Brazil, aside from the cosmetic surgery bit, is more about how totalitarian regimes can exert absolute control over people with bureaucracy, absurd inefficiencies, and irrational dysfunctional systems. But in our society, we have come to accept quite a number of crazy things as normal. Whether that is widespread surveillance, or outright lies told by our leaders or talking heads on the internet, or a media ecosystem that is more concerned about clicks and revenue than they are about being truth-seeking machines. And look, I'm trying to be broad here and not hone in on any specific issues, because I think that is wholly unhelpful to this topic when talking about the modern world. Because just like with Brazil, it's not the central services repairmen's fault that any of this is happening, nor Is it Robert De Niro, their sworn nemesis, Mr. Tuttle, the vigilante Batman of fixing air conditioners, fault that any of this is happening? And it's certainly not either of those parties' fault that the dastardly 23B/6 is needed to do even the most basic repairs. But still, both are sworn enemies. But they are sworn enemies solely because they exist in such an absurd, irrational system. And to quote Bane, "They were born in the darkness." Okay, that's probably not the greatest Bane impression, nor is that the exact quote. But you get my point. But what is true about our modern world is that the absurdly dysfunctional society that we exist in today thrives in our indifference to the things that cause the mess to exist in the first place. And much like in Brazil, where the characters are constantly bombarded with advertisements, consumer goods, and information overload, this relentless consumption and distraction prevents them from questioning the irrationality of their world. It's a reflection of our own society, where we are often too busy consuming and being entertained, like you are doing right now, to recognize or challenge the absurdities and dysfunctions around us. So, to wrap this up, I started with this Terence McKenna quote.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
Like Terence McKenna said, the way out of this is that we need to talk about how weird all of this is. And I don't mean how weird specific issues are or how extreme some ideas are. And I mean how weird and extreme the society has become to make the specific issues you're thinking about right now, or people you're thinking about, or anything that is in your brain that you think that I might be talking about, exist in the first place. Right now, we are living in a doubly hypernormalized society, where each side is so entrenched in unchanging, absurd systems that we cannot agree on much of anything, nor can we agree on what is actually absurd about society. And just like with Robert De Niro and the Central Services repairman, both sides will watch this video and point to absurdities in their opponent's belief systems without looking at their own. But, you know, at the end of the day, Terence McKenna also said,
The good news is that as primates, we're incredibly adaptable to change. Put us in a desert, we survive. Put us in the jungle, we survive. We can put up with about anything, and it's a good thing because we're going to be tested to the limits.
So, you know, I guess we got that going for us. Hey folks, if you want more Man Screaming into Void videos, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe. I enjoy making these. I like screaming into the void, and you know, it's what we do on the internet. So, you know, thanks guys. Y'all have a good day, and I love you. Bye.